Have you ever heard of a story so strange, so magical, that it changes lives forever? Do you believe that something as small as a fish could bring unimaginable wealth to a poor man? This is not just a story, it is a journey of hope, faith, and a little miracle that no one could explain. Stay with me, because what I am about to share might touch your heart deeply and change how you see the world. Once upon a time, there was a man named Thomas. He was poor, so poor that he barely had food to eat. Every day he went to the river with an old fishing net. It had holes, but it was the only thing he had. He dreamed of catching one big fish to feed his family. But day after day, the net came back empty, and Thomas felt hopeless. One morning, Thomas looked at the sky and prayed. He said, "God, just one fish, please. My children are hungry." His hands trembled as he threw the net into the river again. The water was cold, and the morning air felt heavy with sadness. As he pulled the net back, his heart sank because it felt light, just like every other day. But then something shiny moved in the net. His eyes widened. It was a fish, but not like any fish he had seen before. It sparkled like gold in the sunlight. Thomas couldn't believe it. He whispered, "Is this real?" He picked up the fish carefully, afraid it might vanish. The fish looked at him, and for a moment it felt like it was smiling. Thomas thought of selling the fish, but as he looked closer, the fish spoke. Yes, it spoke. "Do not sell me," it said in a soft voice. Thomas dropped the fish in shock. His hands shook, and he looked around, thinking he was dreaming. "Please," Thomas the fish said again, "listen to me." Thomas was terrified, but there was something gentle in the fish's voice. It told him, "If you let me go, I will change your life forever." Trust me. Thomas thought about his hungry children. Could he trust a talking fish? He was confused but also curious. With a deep breath, Thomas put the fish back into the water. As soon as the fish swam away, the river started glowing. The light spread everywhere, and Thomas felt a strange warmth in his heart. He stood there, speechless, not knowing what had just happened. When Thomas returned home, he found something unbelievable. On his small, broken table, there was a bag. Inside it were gold coins, shining brightly. He fell to his knees, tears streaming down his face. Was this a gift from the fish? How could this happen? Thomas used the gold wisely. He bought food for his family, repaired his house, and even helped his neighbors. But he never forgot the fish. Every day he went back to the river, not to catch fish, but to thank it. One day the fish appeared again. This time it looked even brighter. It said, "Thomas, you have shown kindness to others. Now I will give you something more precious than gold." Thomas listened carefully, his heart pounding. The fish told him about the power of sharing, love, and faith. True wealth, it said, is not in gold, but in the goodness you give to the world. From that day, Thomas's life changed completely. People came from far and wide to hear his story. They were inspired by his kindness and faith. Thomas became known as the richest man, not because of his gold, but because of his heart. Can you imagine what would have happened if Thomas had sold the fish? Would he have ever found true happiness? This story teaches us something beautiful. Sometimes miracles come in the smallest forms, like a fish or a kind word. Thomas could never forget that moment when the fish spoke to him. It felt like a dream, but every time he looked at his children smiling or saw his neighbors' lives improving because of his help, he knew it was real. The fish had not just given him gold, it had given him a purpose. Every morning, Thomas would go to the river, not with a net but with hope in his heart. He would sit by the water and think about the fish's words. The river had become his friend, a place where he could reflect on his life. People in the village started calling him the man of miracles. One day, a young boy named Daniel approached Thomas by the river. Daniel was thin and weak, his clothes torn. He said, "Sir, I heard about the fish and how it helped you. Can it help me too? My mother is very sick, and we don't have any money for medicine." Thomas looked into the boy's eyes and saw his pain. It reminded him of his own struggles. He placed a hand on Daniel's shoulder and said, "Sometimes the miracle is not in what we ask for, but in what we do for others. Come with me." Thomas took Daniel to the village doctor and paid for the medicine. He also gave the boy's family enough food to last a month. Daniel hugged Thomas tightly and said, "You are my miracle." That night, Thomas couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about how the fish's gift had allowed him to help others. But deep inside, he wondered, will I ever see the fish again? What if it has more to teach me? The next morning, as Thomas sat by the river, the water began to ripple. The golden fish appeared again, its scales glowing even brighter. Thomas felt a rush of emotions: joy, gratitude, and curiosity. The fish spoke, "Thomas, you have done well. But there is more for you to learn. True wealth comes from understanding that every life has value. Do you see the stars at night? Each one shines, but together they light up the sky. Humans are the same." Thomas nodded, his heart full. The fish continued, "Now I have one more gift for you. It's not gold, but something even more powerful." Before Thomas could ask, the fish disappeared, leaving behind a small bottle floating in the water. Thomas picked up the bottle and opened it carefully. Inside was a piece of paper with words written in a language he didn't understand. He took it to a wise old man in the village who knew many languages. The old man read it and smiled. "These words," he said, "are a blessing. They say, the more you give, the more you will receive. Share your light, and it will never fade." Thomas didn't need gold anymore. He had something far greater, a heart filled with love and a purpose to help others. He started teaching the children in the village how to read and write. He showed people how to work together to improve their lives. The fish never returned, but Thomas felt its presence in every kind act he did. His life was no longer about surviving, it was about living fully and helping others do the same. And now I want to ask you, what would you do if you met a magical fish? Would you ask for gold, or would you choose something greater? This story doesn't end because your story is still being written. Maybe your miracle is waiting for you in the smallest moment, just like Thomas's. Share this story with someone who needs hope, and remember that the greatest treasure is a heart full of kindness.